Now, a big thing too is that now we got like all of our vocal processing going on done. Now, of course, on our libs, you know, I wanted some more effects that was going on after the processing in the bus, right? So this is the bus, and I decided post effects, let me get a little bit more rolling off. I mentioned why we do that before, and then a little bit more compression because I said, hey, how much can I milk it? I use this to milk a little bit more out of stuff, right? Boom. So we have all that going on. Harmonies, right after my effects, I just want a little bit more compression. That's why this is there. Now, the big part here is you have a lot of vocals going on, right? Now, a lot of your vocals, they have to play together, right? They have to work well together. So if you think about this, right, we have main vocal, ad-libs, and harmonies. The harmonies have 4 things in them, right? So that's 4, 5, 6 different vocals potentially going on at the same time, right? But in terms of buses, you have harmonies, libs, and main vocal. They're all going on together. Sometimes they all happen at the exact same time, right? Like if I look at my song, right, and let's think about this. So we're here, boom. There's a point when these harmonies are by themselves, that's great and all, but there is a point when, look at this, boom. My main vocal, my ad-libs, and some harmonies are going on at the same time. That's 4 different things happening at once, right? Now let's see if we can catch a moment where there's 4 harmonies going on at the same time. All right. So luckily that didn't happen, but we did have plenty of times where we had 2 harmonies going on with ad-libs, with that, right? So because you have so many stuff going on at once, you're gonna have a lot of dynamics, levels all over the place. So to get your vocals to all sound cohesive, like they're working together, this is why you need a vocals bus, right? Now from this vocals bus, right, first thing is you have a lot of stuff going on, right? You have 4 different types of vocals going on, and then you have also some of these harmonies are left, some of these harmonies are right. They have their own effects going on in the stereo spectrum. The main vocal has some stereo effects going on, and my ad-libs have stereo imaging along with their own stereo effects. A lot of stereo stuff going on, a lot of sides, a lot of mids, a lot of differences, a lot of different stuff. So again, mid-side vocal compression, right? Mid-side compression on our vocals and multi-band. So that way we're getting so much consistency, so much control. Okay, you just slap a compressor on this like a good old regular compressor, you know, it's gonna, you know, be too broad, too general. You're not gonna affect it as in depth as you'd like to. So that's why we go multi-band for this mid-side. So all the rules are the same, right, in terms of how we're approaching this, what we're trying to accomplish. This is just like something consistently that happens throughout your mix as you're building your song, right? So don't need to explain that too much. Now, what my favorite thing to do here now is this is like where like we sweeten everything up. Now there are so many different saturation plugins. Like sometimes I use the NLS bus. I'm probably gonna get back into using that just because I haven't been using it for some reason. There's the ozone exciter. You can use, you know, that combined with NLS bus. You can use like what is it, Fat Filter Saturn. You know, there's so many plugins. You could even just grab Pro Tools like distortion plugin that has like distortion saturation knobs on it. You can even do that. Like it doesn't matter, but you want to add some sort of saturation because you want to add some dirty type of saturation, pleasing distortion, which is, you know, saturation essentially, and some sort of just like character vibe. Because you're gonna hear your song and be like, all right, it's cool, it's clean, it's mixed well, but man, I want more. I hear these professionals on Spotify, I want more, right? Boom. How we get more is you add saturation, right? And the great thing about it is that this plugin here is kind of CPU intensive, so that's why I really don't use it until I get to my all vocals bus. That way I only have to use one instance of it in this instance, right, in terms of like not just throwing out individual vocals. If you have a CPU for it, go for it. If you got a plugin for saturation that doesn't take as much, like the NLS, which is great, use that too, right? In this instance I didn't, but hey, do what you want. So now we do it in multiple bands because again, because we have low end and a lot of like low mids that are actually going on in your vocals, we need to be able to control how much saturation ends up in each frequency range, because a lot of times if I did like just one across the whole thing, right, and I put 6.3, it might actually add too much saturation, too much distortion in my low end, or maybe it's too much in my high end, right? So what you need to do is tailor how much you get. Now notice this is a 9.8 in terms of the mix parallel, right? Now usually I always do dual triode. Sometimes I'll use like retro or tape, but I only ever use retro, tape, tube, or dual triode. In my opinion, those are the ones I like the best. And so usually I'll put the bands right. I'll put it 50% for the mix. That way it's like not like too much. I'll solo add a certain amount of saturation that I like, and then if I need to, I'll start knocking back this mix knob. Now in this instance, I might have already felt like, man, it's a lot. So like, I might have only been able to get like, 1.2 out of this at 50% mix. So I was like, bro, that's not enough. I want more. So I had to lower the mix, right? Lower the parallel blend so I can get more out of it, right? So a lot of times with saturation, at least this plugin, it's like a battle of blending this mix knob with the amount knob until you find a good place. Do it across all your bands, and then boom, you're good, right? And then that you got a nice blend, and then you just before and after it, right? So if I go ahead and just like before and after like what we got so far, right, and then really to show you what the difference this type of like saturation makes on your vocals, right? All right, let's check it out. Let's make sure that first off that we have nothing soloed. Great. All right, so nothing soloed, so we can really hear this, right? Now let's go ahead and check this out.
I just wanna kiss you, baby girl, thought I told you that I'll be there. I just wanna kiss you, baby girl, thought I told you that I'll be there.
Pretty nice, right? Remember, 9.8, so it's not huge, right? For this song, it's not huge. Some songs mix can be 50%, 20%, 30%, 60%, whatever it is, right? But this is like the difference in this song. Small difference, but it was the right amount because I had so much saturation already. Now listen to it. I'm gonna go A, B it back and forth kind of quicker this time.
I just wanna kiss you, baby girl, thought I told you that I'll be there.
Just a little extra. Sometimes that little extra is good enough, and a lot of times if you get to a point in your mix, on any of these buses where you're like, okay, I can only do 9.8 on my mix knob, I can only get so much of my amount, then a lot of times that like you've kind of like pressed out all the saturation that you reasonably can at this point in your mix, and there's nothing wrong with that because that's how you know you've actually done a good job adding it along the way. Now if you didn't add it along the way and you add it towards the end and you can push it more, awesome, right? That'll end up with a different type of sound than if you did it the other way around. Again, it's your choice. It is all subjective at the end of the day. Now notice that we already did this compression, right? But like, oh man, we have another multi-band compression. Reason being is because remember, saturation plugins like this, they add harmonics, right? So they essentially add frequencies to your frequency spectrum, and they kind of compress frequencies in a sort of way because distortion is kind of like a type of compression in a sense, right? Quite literally it is, but to how it sounds in a sense. So because of that, we've added frequencies. That means our dynamics have kind of changed. So because I could hear that, and I just know that always happens after a big saturation change, I usually go back in with more multi-band compression. Like at this point, if you notice, if I'm compressing, I know I need to compress, I'm using multi-band compression because I don't want to slap a regular compressor across it. If I know I have specific control needs, I make sure that I go ahead and address my compression needs with multi-band compression so I get the right amount everywhere. Because if I just do too aggressive of like across the board general compression, like a R compressor, but like over here, you can really mess up your mix. So it's good to be as finite as you can, well, not as finite, but as fine-tuned as you can be, right? So boom, so now everything's pretty awesome in terms of my vocals. Now I will say that before I even start mixing any vocals at all, something that I typically do is that I just gotta get the beat right. Now like if I just go ahead and solo the beat, right, just straight up solo this. What I'm listening for is I compare it to like the song on Reverb on Spotify, and I think about the wideness, right? Usually the width is the biggest thing. Like in terms of like levels of instruments and stuff, it's kind of dependent on the song and what the producer did, so that's not a big deal. But I do notice consistently, pretty much always consistently, that producers don't make their beats wide enough, which is okay because without vocals, it's kind of hard to even hear that it needs to be way wider, right? But some producers are much better at getting the width going on, so they do. So this song actually had pretty good width on it, so I didn't have to do too much. So if you notice, I always do mid-side EQ. I made a stereo imager, but I get more fine-tuned control when you do a mid-side EQ if you just slap it on the beat. And so notice like nothing in the mid-band, but all I did was I boosted 5.1 dB at 1718. This is what it sounds like, this frequency range. Right, there's some really nice like guitar and like instrumentation that I liked in here, and I wanted more of that in the sides because typically it's like, hey, I want to make this wider or I want to make a certain instrument wider, so I focus in on that in the sides and I boost it how much I need to. Now I'll solo it to go find what I want, but then I'll unsolo it and then I'll do my actual gain, how much I increase it in the full context of how the beat sounds, right? So we before and after. Notice how much soft that guitar is without this boost. Right, and now it sounds like, man, it's more boost in the middle, even though you did in the side. What it is that it was sitting back behind stuff because it was so in the middle that it was kind of sitting back. But once you boost in the sides, sometimes it'll sound like it's just wider in the side, but sometimes it'll sound like it starts to come around and get its life in the middle, right? So it just depends on how wide that instrument actually was. But when you boost in the sides, it'll always kind of give it a nice like volume boost in terms of EQ, but also kind of widen it up if you do it in the sides. And that's why typically I do stuff in the sides. If I feel like, you know, I want more kick in the middle or something like that, I would go to the middle, solo the frequency that I want for the kick, and then boost that. But a lot of times in the mid, you gotta be careful about what you're boosting. But that's usually the first thing I do. I solo the beat, I get the beat sounding really good, then I start mixing everything. Now if you decided that like the beat was okay, you mixed all your vocals, and then you're like, you know what, the beat does actually need a little bit more, and you go back and do this, no big deal, right? You just throw it on, boom, fix it, you're good, right? Typically though, I like to do the beat first just so my vocals, the decision I make is in the context of what the final beat sounds like. But again, just like when mixing like track out and stems, you know, you may make the changes to the beat based on things that come up later on in your total mix, right? So it's just the order doesn't matter, but again, it's always good to address your beat a bit because you can do that. You're not gonna mess anything up. The only thing I usually don't do is like compress a beat because it's already been limited and stuff like that. So I like mid-side EQ, stereo imaging, maybe add some saturation sometimes. But you know, other than that, I won't compress. I have found some instances where I needed to compress on some beats because it was just too dynamic. I needed to sit more behind the vocal to even get the vocal to fit right. But I mean, those are rare cases, rare occasions. So boom, we're good. Now we've done everything right. Now the last thing is actually going to be some mix bus processing. Now with our mix bus processing, this is kind of like mastering, right? So luckily, like if you have some CPU left, usually you can get away with some mix bus processing, which is essentially mastering, right? The only thing that makes something mastering officially is like letting somebody else do your mix bus processing, right? Do your mastering for you. That's the traditional way of thinking about it. But it's just mix bus processing essentially. So you can do that yourself. It's not a big deal. So if I can do it on the same session, it's usually pretty good because if you need to make vocal changes or reverb changes or compression changes or effect changes, like whatever it is, based on like you start processing the entire song and you're like, oh man, now I want to change this because this is too loud, then you can just go back and grab a fader or grab the last plugin instance and change that. But you can't do that once you bounce it to a two track, right? So get away as much of this as you can on the same session. If you can't because like it's just CPU usage, then yeah, bounce it to a 2-track and then master it that way, right? You can still get a great result. Sometimes I get better results that way. But I mean, again, it's just if you can, it's nice to have the extra control. Just like multi-tracks and stems, sometimes it's good to get that extra control. So what I did here was I got the song sounding pretty good, right? So where we're at is right here.
I just wanna kiss you, baby girl, thought I told you that I'll be there.
I like it, right? Now again, we have the entire beat going on, right? All the instrumentation is in the beat. We got every single vocal that we got going on, right? And then we have all the combinations frequencies with the vocals, the beat, all this stuff. We have all these different levels, all these different dynamics. It's all over the place, right? There's stuff in the mid, there's stuff in the side, there's low end, mid range, high end, all this stuff, right? So what do you know? Multi-band compression, mid side. Again, we're going to have the same type of thought process, but it is slightly different than mixing. Reason being is because notice my release is 487 here. Now typically when it comes to mastering, when I do my release on my compressor, the way that I want to set that is usually like a quarter note. Usually a quarter note is good because it's like it's not necessarily like a slow release, but it is like a medium slow release, right? And then on your limiter, you want to have a pretty slow release, right? So a half note, that's 975, right? So on my limiter, right, I put 975 and then I have 47. Now notice the limiter is at the very top. I only have it set just in case it needs to act, right? So just in case it's somehow doing something, it can act, but the release will be set correctly, right? So that's why I just set that in general. But the compression, we're having multi-band compression going on, right? Because we're not limiting yet. I'll explain in a moment what limiting is truly like for mastering, but right now we're just making mixed bus decisions, which is mastering, right? So ratio 3.0, again, ratio set based on taste. You set your threshold the same way you would set your threshold any other time, and the same thing. We got what would be the eighth note that we had, or quarter note, whatever it was for a release, right? Now attack set is based on what you're hearing, set at the taste. Ratio is the taste. Boom. So let's go before and after.
I just wanna kiss you, baby girl. Thought I told you that I'll be there. Trust me, girl, I can't promise you the world, but I promise my time, my mind, my time.
Now, it's very subtle, right? The reason that it's subtle is because you're not trying to like clamp and destroy everything, but the process that you're thinking of is, I know for a fact that the instrumentation, the vocals, all that coming together, there is a lot of different dynamics going on to create headroom for loudness, right? To create headroom for my limiters to not work as hard at the end. I need to get dynamics smaller. I need to get the dynamics range smaller, right? Now you want to set it to it still sounds like musical and dynamic in terms of like musicality wise, sounding clean, not over compressed, but you know that you need to create headroom, right? Now at this point, my thought process is I'm doing this because it's like, how can I either enhance the song, the mix, the master, how can I enhance it, or how can I create headroom? That's what you're thinking about with mixed processing or mastering. Trying to create headroom or trying to enhance. That's what you're thinking about. If you gotta fix something, you can a little bit, but like in your mix is when the fixing usually kind of happens, right? You can make adjustments based on as you boosted, but you shouldn't be trying to fix things in the master. That doesn't make any sense, right? Same thing on the mix bus. You don't fix stuff on the mix bus. So boom, I did that, right? Got things more controlled. Bad, we got some headroom. Now, right here, I have an enhancement. Now I'm using the Pt3, the EQ P1A. Now for me personally, I always go to 100 right here. I always go to 16 here. Sometimes I do 10, sometimes I do 12, sometimes I do 16, but I usually start off on 16. I boost is the taste. Now what I'll do is I'll max this out all the way to 10, pull it back till it sounds normal again. Then I'll put it back to 0 and then boost it until I feel like it's enough. The reason I do that is because if you just start from here and start to slowly go up, you're gonna be like, oh, that's enough. But you actually don't know it's enough because you don't know what was reasonable, how much to boost it, right? You're probably under boosting it. So you go to 10 to hear what way too much sounds like, you back it off until it sounds reasonable, and then that's usually a good place, so you keep that place in your mind. So if we went to 4, you know, you brought it back to 4, that's a good place. Then I go back to 0, I'll like pause it for a second, few seconds, play it again, and then start to boost it. And I know that 4 is probably no further than it should go, so I keep going, and then usually I might say, okay, at 2 is when it sounded good, right? Or 1.8, or sometimes I will go back to 4. Oh, that is better, right? But usually it's always somewhere in between where you stopped and where nothing is, right? It's usually in between, so that's a good way to set it. Same thing with the boost here, right? Same thing, overdo it, go to a place stop, go to 0, pause it, wait a few seconds, and then start the boost, see where it's at. So notice right here we got 2.9, we got 1.8. Now I don't know if there's like dB, I just know that's the number here, so boom, that's what we're using. Now again, 16, 12, or 10, you just play with it. But I'll always use 100. Sometimes maybe I'll do 60, but usually 100 is just the ones that sound good to me. So let's watch before and after this right here, right? This is like a pretty nice difference.
I just wanna kiss you, baby girl, thought I told you that I'll be there. Trust me, girl, I can't promise you the world, but I'm.
So it just has a nice type of livening up, vibing character, like vibe, like this soul, right? Got a nice type of vibe that we're adding. So that's why this is always great to use. Now in mixing, you can put this on like your all vocals bus. You can put this on like your main vocal bus after the effects, you're right, and you can stack these, not stack, but like drop a few instances of this throughout your mix and then another one in your master, so you're getting a lot more saturation and a lot more character and vibe. I definitely recommend doing that. I do that a lot of times. Now in this mix I didn't do that just because my workflow was just how it was, but the good thing about it is that, again, you can do this type of stuff. You can open up old mixes and just apply this type of thinking, right? Like this mix plus processing that we've done, you can just apply that and be like, oh wow, so much better, right? So the great thing about it is that in this digital age, we can do things on computers and we can do things in these Pro Tools sessions, where back in the day, they used to have to use actual outboard gear, and whenever you made a decision, you were just there when you had to bounce this out, or you were just there because good luck recalling your session the next day. We're gonna write down some sheets and come back and put the knobs right where they were. That's a lot of work. That's kind of hard to get accurate. So the great thing is that it's a blessing for us to even be able to do this, right? So take advantage of it, play with mixes, but again, man, like dropping little gems of this on buses throughout your mix and then on your final mix bus is definitely a big thing to do. It helps a lot, right? As long as CPU can handle it. So we did that. Now let's just hear like these two bus changes all together, right? Because it's just like some multi-band compression and then some enhancement, right? But listen to the difference that it actually makes.
I just wanna kiss you, baby girl, thought I told you that I'll be there. Trust me, girl, I can't promise you the world, but I promise my time, my mind, my time. You know
that for like the beginning, like just on and off. Listen to this.
I just wanna kiss you, baby girl, thought I told you that. I just wanna kiss you, baby girl, thought I told you that.
Right, it just pops, right? It just pops in your face, right? Now it's pretty nice. Now essentially that is the entirety of my mix right here, guys. At this point, usually when I ran out of CPU, I probably try to add like another instance of like my ozone exciter just to get like enhancement across the entire mix, but I don't think my CPU allowed me, right? So at this point I had to actually bounce out my mix to a new session to master on a 2-track. Now I got a little bit of mix brush processing here, so that's awesome, but this is the entirety of the mix, you guys. So let's go ahead and just check it out from the beginning and play a little bit of it, and then we'll call it right there. All right, let's see. Boom, all the plugins are on. Let's check it out.
Girl, you know I'll be there. Nighttime or daytime, I'll be there. I just wanna hold you, I just wanna touch you, I just wanna kiss you. Baby girl, thought I told you that I'll be there. Trust me, girl, I can't promise you the world.
Now, right from now, let's check it out just from like the hook right here. Let's turn everything off and then turn everything back on. Let's just leave the effects on, right? Let's leave the effects on to just be, you know, a little bit generous, right? Let's just leave that on. We'll leave on the tuning right here, and we'll just do before and after. So we'll check out before the mix essentially, and then we're going to check out after the mix. All right, now let's go. Let's check this out from right here.
Girl, you know I'll be there. Girl, you know nighttime or daytime, I'll be there. I just wanna hold you, I just wanna touch you.
All right. Here we go. The final piece.
Girl, you know I'll be there. Girl, you know Nighttime or daytime, I'll be there. I just wanna hold you, I just wanna touch you, I just wanna kiss you. Baby girl, thought I told you.
And there it is right there, man, the entirety of the mix. Now, this was quite a long tutorial. Mixing is always going to be something that you know, just takes more time than mastering. You know, mastering you can get done in like 30 minutes to an hour a lot of times, right? Mixing, it can take 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, maybe even 4 hours, right? Maybe longer if you're newer to mixing. However, take your time with the mix, make the mix about as good as you can get it, because whenever you got the mix at a really good place, when you do your mix plus process and your mastering, you'll be able to truly take that mix to a final finished professional product that you can release or send back to like your artists you're working with or your clients. So man, I hope I did a good job at giving you some tips, some stuff that made a lot of sense for you guys. Hey man, and I'll just check you in the next one.